Sir, I need you to move to seat 32B. We have a family that needs to sit together, and your seat is the only one available in this section that can accommodate them," said the flight attendant, her smile professional but firm. Sergeant Thomas Ashton, 78, a veteran with a noticeable limp, looked up from his aisle seat in economy comfort, the seat he had carefully selected months ago for a little extra legroom on the long flight. "But this is my assigned seat," he said quietly. "I specifically booked it due to a service-related knee injury." The flight attendant's smile didn't fade. "I understand, sir, but we need to prioritize families. It's just for this flight." 9 minutes later, as Sergeant Ashton uncomfortably settled into the cramped middle seat at the back, the cockpit door opened. The captain emerged, scanned the cabin, and walked directly to him, stopping in the aisle and offering a crisp salute. "If you believe respect for service should never be compromised for convenience, type 'Honor our vets' below." Sergeant Thomas Tom Ashton, U.S. Marine Corps, retired, carried the map of his life's journeys etched onto his face, and in the slight, persistent limp favoring his left leg, a souvenir from a long-ago firefight in a place most people couldn't pronounce. At 78, he was lean. His silver hair was neatly combed. His eyes, though faded with age, still held the keen observational skills honed over decades. He was traveling from his small home in Arizona to his granddaughter's college graduation in Boston, a cross-country flight he had looked forward to despite the usual discomforts of air travel. Knowing the challenges a long flight posed for his knee, which had never fully recovered, Tom had meticulously booked his seat months in advance. 15C, an aisle seat in the economy comfort section of transcontinental flight 308. The extra inches of legroom and easier access to stand and stretch were not a luxury, but a necessity to manage chronic pain. He had used his modest pension savings to pay extra for this specific seat, wanting to arrive at his granddaughter's special day without being crippled by the journey. He had boarded early as per his group, stowed his small carry-on, and settled into 15C, relieved to have the space he needed. He looked forward to a quiet flight, perhaps reading the book he had brought. The flight was nearly full. The usual pre-departure bustle filled the cabin as passengers found their seats and stowed their luggage. Tom was absently watching the controlled chaos when a flight attendant, a woman in her late 30s named Susan, with a crisp uniform and an air of harried efficiency, approached his row. "Excuse me, sir," she said, addressing Tom directly, her smile polite but strained. "We have a family, a mother and 2 young children, who were unfortunately separated by our booking system. They need to sit together, and your seat, 15C, along with the 2 beside it, is the only block of 3 available in this cabin section that can accommodate them." Tom looked up, surprised. "My seat?" "But I specifically selected and paid for this seat, 15C months ago, due to a medical need for legroom." Susan's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. "I understand, sir, and we appreciate your cooperation. Sometimes these reseatings are unavoidable. To accommodate families, it's airline policy to prioritize keeping families, especially those with young children, together. I appreciate the need for families to sit together," Tom replied calmly. "But I also have a need for this specific type of seat. Is there another aisle seat available in this section? Or perhaps an upgrade, given the inconvenience?" Susan glanced at her tablet, tapping quickly. "I'm afraid all other aisle seats in economy comfort are occupied, and first class is completely full. The only seat I can offer you at this point is 32B. Tom knew where 32B was, a middle seat, standard economy, likely near the lavatories at the very back of the plane. the exact opposite of what he needed. "A middle seat? In the back?" he asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "That will be extremely difficult for my knee on a 5-hour flight." "Sir," Susan said, her voice now losing its polite edge, tinged with impatience as other passengers began to look on. "I really need your cooperation here. The family is waiting to be seated, and we need to close the doors for departure. It's just for this one flight. We can offer you a complimentary beverage voucher for your trouble." A complimentary beverage voucher for giving up a carefully selected prepaid seat essential for his physical well-being to be crammed into a middle seat for 5 hours of pain. The offer felt insulting. "This isn't about a beverage, young lady," Tom said, his voice still quiet, but now firm. "This is about a confirmed booking for a medical necessity. Are you telling me airline policy forces me to aggravate a service-connected injury to accommodate a booking error made by the airline?" Passengers nearby were now openly listening. The mother with the 2 young children stood a few rows back, looking anxious and embarrassed. Susan flushed slightly under Tom's steady gaze and the attention of others. "Sir, I am simply trying to follow procedure and ensure all passengers are accommodated appropriately. If you refuse to move, it will delay the flight for everyone." The subtle threat hung in the air. Tom recognized the tactic: public pressure, the implication that he was being selfish. He'd seen it used in different contexts to different ends. He looked at the anxious mother, at the restless children. He didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to delay the flight, didn't want to cause that family distress, even though it was the airline's error, not his. With a heavy sigh and a feeling of weary resignation, Tom slowly unbuckled his seatbelt. "All right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll move. But I want this noted. My name is Thomas Ashton, Sergeant, U.S. Marine Corps, retired. This is not acceptable." He picked up his small bag and began the slow, painful process of extricating himself from the aisle seat, his knee already protesting. Susan offered a tight, relieved smile. "Thank you for your understanding, sir. 32B. Middle." She then turned to usher the grateful family into Tom's vacated row, her focus already shifted. Tom's sacrifice already just another problem solved in her busy day. Tom made his way slowly down the crowded aisle, wincing with each step as he navigated bags and outstretched legs. He finally reached 32B, a narrow middle seat between a large man already encroaching on the armrests and a young woman engrossed in her phone. He squeezed in, his knee immediately protesting the lack of space. The flight attendant who directed him there offered no assistance, no apology. He felt a familiar mix of anger, frustration, and helplessness. It wasn't just the physical discomfort, it was the casual dismissal, the lack of respect, the feeling of being an inconvenience. He closed his eyes, trying to manage the throbbing in his knee. The flight hadn't even left the gate. As he sat there, a fellow passenger in the row ahead, a businessman who had overheard the entire exchange, discreetly pulled out his phone. He was a Diamond Elite frequent flyer and had a dedicated customer service number. He quickly typed a message. "Transcontinental Flight 308, Gate C12. Elderly Marine Veteran SGT Thomas Ashton. Service-connected knee injury. Forced out of prepaid economy comfort aisle seat 15C into 32B middle to accommodate family." Flight attendant Susan was dismissive of medical needs, grossly mishandled. Passenger is visibly distressed. Suggest immediate cockpit notification if possible. He hit send, hoping it would reach someone who cared more than the gate agent. He wasn't sure it would help, but he had to try. The cabin doors closed. The safety briefing began. The plane pushed back. Tom braced for a long, painful flight. His granddaughter's graduation felt a million miles away. 7 minutes passed, then 8. The aircraft was taxiing. At precisely 9 minutes after the cabin door had closed, as the plane was holding short of the active runway, the cockpit door opened. This was unusual. Cockpit doors rarely opened after pushback unless there was an issue. The captain emerged, a man in his late 50s with a commanding presence. His uniform was immaculate, 4 gold stripes on his epaulets. He didn't address the cabin immediately. Instead, he scanned the rows, conferred briefly with the lead flight attendant, not Susan, but another, more senior one, who pointed discreetly toward the back of the plane. The captain began walking down the aisle. His gaze swept the cabin. He stopped at row 32. His eyes found Tom, squeezed uncomfortably in the middle seat. He looked at Tom's face, noted the discomfort, the quiet resignation. The captain paused. His expression is unreadable. Then it softened with what looked like dawning recognition and respect. He stood in the narrow aisle directly in front of Tom. Then, in full view of the surprised passengers in the rear cabin, Captain David Miller, himself a former Air Force pilot, drew himself up and rendered a crisp, formal military salute. "Sergeant Thomas Ashton?" The captain's voice was clear, carrying easily over the hum of the engines. "Sir, on behalf of Transcontinental Airlines and as a fellow veteran, please accept my most profound apologies for the completely unacceptable way your seating has been handled on this flight." Tom looked up, stunned. Passengers craned their necks, whispered. The man beside Tom stopped encroaching on the armrest. "Captain," Tom managed. "Sergeant Ashton," Captain Miller continued, voice firm but respectful. "I was just made aware of your situation via a communication from our operations center, triggered by a concerned passenger and cross-referenced with our Heroes Liaison Alert system. Forcing you from your medically necessary pre-booked seat was a serious error in judgment, a failure of our airline's commitment to those who have served. It will be addressed." He looked around. "Is there a Miss Susan flight attendant on this crew?" Susan appeared from near the galley, pale and apprehensive. Captain Miller's gaze was like ice. "Miss Susan, you will personally escort Sergeant Ashton to seat 1A in first class, immediately. My co-pilot's jump seat is more comfortable than 32B. If first class is full, you will ask for a volunteer. If no one volunteers, you will explain to the passenger in 1A that the captain of this aircraft requires that seat for a Medal of Honor nominee who was egregiously mistreated by this airline. Understood?" Slight embellishment. Tom wasn't a MOH nominee, but the captain's words were for maximum effect. Susan nodded mutely, face ashen. Captain Miller turned back to Tom, expression softened. "Sergeant Ashton, please allow us to correct this. We owe you far more than an aisle seat." He helped Tom out of the cramped seat. Passengers watched in stunned silence, many now looking at Tom with newfound respect. The businessman who had sent the message gave a discreet thumbs up. Tom, assisted by a now deferential Susan, made his way toward the front of the plane. Captain Miller addressed the cabin over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We will have a slight delay. Transcontinental Airlines is committed to honoring and respecting all our passengers, especially those who have served with distinction. We had a serious failure in that commitment today. That failure is being rectified. We appreciate your patience as we ensure our heroes are treated with the dignity they deserve. We will be underway shortly." There was a smattering of applause. In first class, the passenger in 1A, having overheard everything, vacated his seat without being asked. Tom was settled in, his legs stretched. A pre-departure beverage was offered. Captain Miller visited once more. Again, Sergeant, my apologies. Enjoy your flight, and thank you for your service. Tom looked at the captain. Thank you for yours, and for remembering. The flight was smooth, comfortable. Susan was conspicuously absent from first class. Upon arrival, Tom was met by a special services rep with more apologies, a full refund, and a voucher for future first-class travel for him and his granddaughter. The airline launched an internal review of its family seating and veteran accommodation policies. Tom made it to his granddaughter's graduation, rested and in good spirits, his faith in basic decency and the camaraderie of service quietly restored. He knew systems could fail. People could be thoughtless. But he also knew sometimes it only takes one person to make a call and one leader to take a stand to ensure honor gets its due, even at 30,000 feet. Subscribe to this channel if you believe true leaders step up, and our veterans should always be given the respect they've earned.